Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Today, we're stepping into a question that sits right at the edge of belief and experience. How do we know if magic is real? And if it is, what does real even mean in a world of psychology, folklore, and bias? Our guest today, Tracy Nicholas, works where practical folklore and meets everyday practice. Works where practical folklore meets everyday practice, and her book, Mind Over Magic, Making Magic in Everyday Life, tries to do something a lot of occult books avoid. It doesn't just tell you what to do. It asks, how do we actually decide what's true? What's a projection? What's pattern recognition? And what might be something stranger that survives our skepticism? Quite brilliant, I would say. So we're going to talk about methods, mindset, and meaning, placebo and belief, story and ritual, confirmation bias, and yes, transformation, and how to build a practice that doesn't collapse the moment you look at it too hard. Thank you, everybody. And this is the Head Rejects and the Head Reject himself, Nick Cardinal Electric Head.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that amazing intro. I love it. Such a professional. Right. I'm gonna have you keep doing it.
Yeah, please.
I'll probably start getting better ratings.
Yeah, don't stop it.
Yeah, my 4 stars will go up to 5 now. Thanks. But yeah, and all the complaints have nothing to do with the quality. It's always the production. So I guess I should complain. Yeah.
Right.
But thank you very much for that. And yes, I'm very excited to have Tracy Nicholas on today. I was looking through as much as I could about the book and what's it entailed, and I think it's like really right up my alley, and I think will be for the rest of the Occult Rejects. But yeah, Cardinal Electric Head or Nick from the Occult Rejects. Definitely check us out. We're all on all major platforms. We do have occultresearchinstitute.org. And I never push it really. And I don't know why. I just feel stupid trying to sell stuff to people. But do have T-shirts. If you're interested in getting any T-shirts from the Occult Rejects, we do have 2 of them. We have one with the skeleton and the hands crossing. And then the one that looks like the birth of Aphrodite, the birth of Venus. So, yeah, we got those for sale. You can hit me up for that. And, yeah, this weekend we got a roundtable Play-Doh coming on. Magus is going to be there for that for sure. Hopefully, maybe even Mark. And we got P.D. Newman and Ike Baker both coming on for that Play-Doh roundtable. So you already know it's going to be a banger. And then we got David Shoemaker this Sunday. So check that out. Highly, highly looking forward to that.
That's a huge weekend.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, some big names and big topics, man, for sure. Yeah, even David Shoemaker he even asked, can I talk about the Astrum Argentum? And I was like, yeah, sure. I've never had anybody on the show want to talk about that. I was like, yeah, let's go, man. Yeah. So it should be interesting because he runs one, so he wants to promote it. But I'm going to shut up. Enough out of me. And Robbie Marks, please let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work and your art.
Yes, it's good to see everybody today. I am Robbie Marks or R Marks. I'm an artist illustrator, and I do a variety of research and writing as well. And if anybody wants to check out my various works, you can check out my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that will pull up my Meta Mindcast, all my artwork, everything. And yeah, I'm excited for this today. Good to meet you, Tracy.
Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robbie.
Yeah.
And Kaiva, I don't think your mic is working yet, so I don't know if you can say anything. It's still muted on StreamYard.
Now I'm just going to use my computer microphone.
Perfect.
We got it.
Yeah, until I get this other thing figured out. It's brand new. I got a brand new microphone. Figuring it out. I'm not a tech wizard.
Yeah, no, you're fine with this.
Yeah, I'm more of a wizard of the stars. So I do astrology and tarot. That is my specialty. You can find me at Instagram at Kaiva Rose, as well as Facebook. And then I do post weekly astrology videos as well as daily astrology videos on YouTube and Instagram. And then if you're into fantasy fiction, I do write young adult novels. I have one series called Root Odyssey. It's fun, it's adventurous, and it's magical. Thank you.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you for making it. I always enjoy you being able to come on. Hopefully we'll see more of you. And we got Tracy Nicholas. Please let everybody know whatever you want to plug. Please let them know where they can find all your stuff, your podcast, your book, everything.
Yeah, I think that the best way to find me is to go to my main website, which is folkloringlife.com. And it'll give you links to where you can go buy the book, where you can, find my podcasts, and where you can find my school community and my Substack. So it's all in there. It's like a big link tree, but I pay a lot more for it and had to work harder to set it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then you'll find my book, Mind Over Magic, which, as we are streaming this, today is the release day. So it's a very exciting time for me right now. I can't believe that it took so long to get here. And like now it's like, oh no, I have so many things I haven't gotten done yet. So.
Congratulations that it's out today. That's great.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to see if I could try to change the thumbnail so I can at least have your book on it. To be honest. So, but thanks, and please, if you don't mind, I ask all guests this at the beginning that are into the occult, which just seems to be every guest now anyway. How did you find yourself getting into this? Like, what was it that brought you into magic or the occult or practicing?
I think that I've always kind of been interested in it. And even as like a little kid, I was doing things that now I would consider to be like magical practice, but I wouldn't have called it that then. I remember I wasn't very athletic as a kid. And so there was woods around my middle school. And so I would go at recess, I'd go into the woods and there was a big rock and I would decorate it. And so it was like, that was really my first like nature altar. So it's always been interesting to me. I've been interested in folklore my whole life. I've been interested in magic. And so the book, like getting to the book is really kind of a culmination of the work that I've done in the past 40 years, both magically and in my mundane life as well. And I worked in, corporate America for a long time, up until about 10 years ago. So, yeah, it's just, it always resonates with me, and I like having my life feel more magical. And so as time goes on, I find myself investing in it more and more with my time and my effort. So yeah, it's just always been an interest.
Awesome. And what made you decide to write this book? Like, what do you feel is in this book that the public needs that's different than other ones out there?
Well, I think that a lot of books that are talking about magic are telling you how to practice magic, and they're telling you what it is. Like there's a lot of like spell recipe books is the way I like to think about them. And so it's like, oh, here's a bunch of spells you can do. And some of them are academic and they say, okay, here's what, if you're going to study Kabbalah and ancient, esoteric kind of work like that. And so those two things were out there. And what I was seeing was like, we don't have a modern look at why we believe what we believe, right? Like, why are these beliefs important to us? And why, like, what do we know? What can we prove today that we would have considered a magical belief 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 years ago, right? Because the science moves quickly now. And so I think that there are certain things that are treated as if they're very like woo-woo, but we've got some solid science. We've got some research that shows that there are things that are real. Now, there's a lot of pseudoscience. And I think that, the problem with that is it sort of muddies the water. And I try not to go into any of the pseudoscience. I'm like, if there's no solid science that we can say, yes, this has been tested and peer tested, if we can't say that, I'm just going to sort of put back on my folklorist hat and say, okay, we can't prove it, but as a folklorist, it doesn't matter to me whether or not something is true. What matters to me is why people believe it, what they believe, right? Oh. And so, for example, like spirits and ghosts, right? I do not believe that we can prove at this point that spirits are real, right? And the reason I don't think we can prove that, and we may someday, and that would be great, I would love that. The reason we can't prove it is because we don't understand what consciousness is. And what is a spirit except for consciousness that has passed beyond death, right? It's some sort of, it's your great uncle, or it's, somebody who had a traumatic event and they keep going back and reliving it, right? But if we don't even understand like how we put people under for surgery. Like, we know it works. We don't know the mechanism in the brain that makes it work like that. And so without being able to prove consciousness, we can't prove that consciousness lasts in some form beyond. Now, what's interesting there is, you see like sort of death-related folklore and belief systems all over the world, right? And of course, that's going to be because we tell stories about things that are important to us. And so, death is important to us. And a lot of people have beliefs that there is some sort of afterlife, there are spirits, all of these kinds of things. And that's seen worldwide. And so that to me is interesting. It's a compelling case to me to look at it harder, to look at the science behind it harder, because so many people believe and so many people have had experiences, right? And I think once you do, we're all on a spectrum, right? There are complete skeptics who say none of this is real, right? And then there are true believers that say it's all real. There are fairies and elves and dragons and it's all of it, right? I think most of us are somewhere along that spectrum. And we move closer to the true believer side when things that we can't explain happen to us. Somebody believes that they saw a ghost, or they were abducted by aliens, or they were abducted by fairies, whatever it is that they believe. And again, it's important that they believe it, not whether or not I believe that, it's true and it really happened to them, right?
Well, we have somebody in the comments who always says they got abducted by a vampire cult. So,
I actually to a woman who got catfished by a vampire cult. And she talks about her story. It was like this online thing for like 10 years.
Oh, what's her name? I think we had her on possibly.
Celeste.
Yeah. Yeah, we had her on. Yeah. And I'm talking about somebody completely different, actually. So that's funny. It's funny. We had Thumper Forge on last night, and he told me that when he went and checked out the podcast, I don't know how it came up, but he said that episode, he just found that one. And as soon as he saw like ex-vampire cult member, he was like, I already knew it was the show for me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
So that's funny stuff.
My question is then, I have a question. So what do you think about the idea of then maybe redefining the term spirit as something different than just straight up consciousness leaving the body, and that it has to be something that is of the dead?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, certainly there's that's a possibility. And I think that you bring up a really interesting lens to look through, because I think that our definitions are really important. Right. And so when we're defining things, when we're defining magic, when we're defining folklore, those are important. So if you want to look at it through a lens that you feel like has a more real world view or application, then I think that's perfectly valid. You don't have to take my definition for what a spirit is, know?
Yeah, of course.
Nice. And also, I've seen several different definitions of kind of what spirit entities are in regard to this idea of the consciousness leaving the body, or some sort of an electrical imprint that is left on the area by the living. Or then you have the Japanese idea of like hate or rage will build to a point that it will develop these kind of rage entities. So I think there are different kind of understandings of these different metaphysical ideas, but like you were saying, at the same time, there's no hard found scientific way to document repeatably the understanding of these things within physical science.
Right. And I think people are trying. The ghost hunters go out there with their, they're checking for like electrical signals and pulses and stuff like that. So I think that there are people exploring it. I don't think that we're there yet. And yes, there are certainly different kinds of thoughts about what different types of spirits, right? There are ones that are conscious and they know who they were in their most recent life, and they want to communicate with the people that were in their life. There's that kind. And then there are the ones that are just on a loop. And, and almost always those stories are about some tragic occurrence. They got, murdered tragically. And so they keep doing that. And that's when I think you're talking about the electrical sort of imprint that stays, which, that could be certainly valid, because why are there some places that are more haunted than others?
Right.
And so, like, why do certain places, and obviously there are going to be places like hospitals and prisons where, people die in, under difficult circumstances, and you'd expect that. But then there are, random homes or hotels or what have you. And so, why those places and not elsewhere? I think about, I'm in Chicago, and I think about Lincoln Park in Chicago. Right. And Lincoln Park is built over, and it has a zoo. It's a beautiful park. It's along the lakefront, and it was built over the original city cemetery. And they, they just said, the city's gotten too big. We need this land back. They took it back. But a lot of the people, especially the poorer people, they weren't ever moved. Some people with money were moved, but a lot of the people are just still under there. Now, I hear about this and I know about it, but people aren't talking about like ghosts popping up in, the petting zoo in Lincoln Park Zoo, right? But then they're talking about places like, particular hotels, particular graveyards that are like, oh, this is the most haunted place in Chicago. So I think it's interesting that some places are considered to be very haunted, even with no direct connection to like horrible deaths and things like that.
Right. Almost energetically charged.
Well, and that's what I was kind of wondering too, like about, like when you go to other cultures, like in Bali in particular, when something has a lot of spirit, they'll wrap like a sacred cloth around it. And so there's also kind of the idea of like nature spirits. Like when you say spirit, I instantly go to like nature spirits, because that's what I personally feel like I connect to, like trees and just kind of that spirits of the earth. And I don't necessarily know if they're like, I don't think they're deceased people. I don't know if I can even explain what those spirits are, but I know like even in Japan, like I think there's that concept of just like nature spirit. So do you have a distinction between like, I mean, I know it's like definitions, but my mind when I go to spirit goes to that. So I just want to kind of understand that perspective perhaps.
Yeah, I think that, land spirits or elemental spirits, those kinds of things, that's a very different thing than when you're talking about like humans that have passed over. It's also a different thing when you're considering fairies and elves, and are those spirits, are they actual creatures out there? And so I think that spirits in general is such a broad category, and it can be so many different things. And as part of my practice, I certainly am respectful of like the nature spirits and the elemental spirits, and that's incorporated into my personal practice. But that's my belief. That's not something that I'm saying, hey, everybody, I'm going to tell you why, land spirits are real. But I do believe that, and I incorporate that into my work.
Yeah, I think it's the most tangible way to show people that spirit is real, because like you can feel the energy of a tree. Go lean up against a tree and you're going to feel like it's like sucking you in, right? So in kind of that sense, it is almost the most provable type of spirit in a way.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about energetic work, so we have, like human beings have a particular vibration, and there's a range in which we're healthiest, right? I think it's between like 7 hertz and 20 hertz, right? And if we start to get too high in that range, we start to feel things like we have disorders like anxiety or insomnia or those kinds of things, right? If we're vibrating too high. If we start to get too low, we start to get, depression and all of that. And so most of us are now sitting in front of a computer for a lot of the day, or there's Wi-Fi all around us, and all of these electronic devices that are everywhere around us and on our bodies raise our vibration. They vibrate higher than we do. So it raises our vibration, right? But when you go out into nature, if you look at the trees and the land itself, the vibration there is lower. And so that's why people go out and they're like hugging trees and stuff, because they're getting themselves back to a more balanced place for their body. And so that's very real on an energetic level. And again, saying like, I'm going to say that this is a tree spirit, I completely support that. I think it's great. I believe in that myself. So of course I'm going to be like, yeah, that's right. You know, if somebody else doesn't, they just say, I just want to go with straight up science on it. I know I feel better when I go out into the woods. Like, well, then go hug that tree. And I don't care what you call it in a lot of ways, because I think about this. Okay, so I have a brother, right? His name's John. And so when I talk to him, I call him John, right? And he's got 3 kids. And they call him Dad, right? And so the fact that they call him something different than I do is indicative that we have a different relationship, right? But it doesn't affect my relationship at all. And so, you know, when you're talking about deities, right? If you want to pray to Hecate, right? That's great. If you want to call that entity Jesus, hey, that it's fine. It doesn't change my relationship with what I think of as deity. And it doesn't change, you know, I don't change my relationship with spirit based on what other people call it.
I wanted to add when you were talking about.
You too, I guess.
Oh, go ahead.
You can go. No, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, in regard to when you go into the woods, I think that the human experience, as far as sensory organs, when you're taking in the light and you're in, like you were talking about, these different waveforms like Wi-Fi and the blue light coming from the screens. When you go into the forest, you're getting that blue light from the sky and the green light from the leaves, and you're also in the energetic toward fields of the trees. But those the blue and green waves entering into the eyes are some of the slowest wavelengths, and thereby they do, by the nature of experiencing them, like you were saying, bring the vibrational wavelength into regulation.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that the sky looks blue to us, is
Right.
because the light that's coming through, that's the easiest to see because it's the slowest vibration. And that's why that works like that. So yeah, I agree with you. And I think that, you know, there are lots of ways that we perceive energy.
Right.
And I think that, you know, we've all been to a concert where it's just like the energy is so good in the room and like everyone's pumped up and it just, you know, so we know we exchange energy, right? And you can feel it when it's not that way. You can feel it when it's perfect performance, technically perfect, but it's like, it was off, you know?
Yeah.
And so we know as human beings, we exchange energy. So it's not any kind of leap to think that we are going to exchange energy with other living things at the very least.
Yeah. And I have a question then. Would you say that with your book and your own practices is that you're taking a paradigm shift from thinking that like how things, we start from materiality and then go out that then the body creates consciousness? Are you switching it to it's first consciousness and our brain and nervous system is more like a radio tuning fork that brings consciousness in, and that is how we're, you know, having that paradigm shift?
I don't know that I would necessarily sort of mix consciousness in with what we've been talking about energetically. I don't know that one of those things, like I don't know that how we feel energetically affects whether or not we have consciousness. I think, I mean, it does, because we have electrical impulses in our bodies, and you know, we know that you know, we react to things around us, but it's complicated. There's so many things that go into the way that we're reacting. If I'm going to, you know, pull out a definition, when I'm defining magic, and I define it in my book, I define it as a change to the environment either within you or around you without any mechanical intervention. Right. So, and one of the easiest examples that we all know is the placebo effect. Right. You get a pill, it's completely inert, you take it, and like it does nothing to your body. And yet your brain says, oh, I took medicine. And so your brain just heals your body, right? Like what is more magical than that? Your brain decides what it's going to be, and it affects your health or whatever the condition is. And the funny thing about placebos is that it works whether or not a person knows that it is a placebo. Now, it doesn't work as effectively if they know it's a placebo, but it still works. And I think that speaks to what ritual offers people. You have a ritual of taking a pill, and your brain knows when you take a pill, it's giving you medicine in some way. Even though logically you know that's not true in this case, your brain still makes that association. And I think that's why ritual is so powerful for us.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would say then personally, this is how I view reality, is that from exactly what you just said, that is changing a paradigm from the mechanical to the idea, from the idea to the mechanical. Because if our reality was just straight up a mechanistic reality, that placebo effect would have, personally, I think would have no effect. But since there seems to be something different with how consciousness interacts with our nervous system, instead of our nervous system producing based upon electrical impulses, then all of a sudden the brain is creating it. It seems like there's some kind of funny phenomena happening where consciousness is being picked up in a way and being able to be more of a malleable thing than the mechanistic functional universe that like scientific materialism wants us to present itself.
7 hermetic principles, the first is all is mental.
All is mental. Yeah.
So it's and like you were talking about the idea of these magical books with various formulae or spells, that you use. These are the various placebos. In essence, I think that would you relate that it kind of conditions the mind to be able to facilitate the magic?
Yes and no. I think that the ongoing practice is one of the things that allows people to deepen their spiritual practice and their ability to work magic, right? It's like anything else you do. It's like working out your body, right? But you're working out your mind. You can't just go into the gym day one and be lifting as if you had been building yourself up for years, right? You have to start where you are. And so I think that the practice of thinking about the magic, doing whatever rituals you want or don't want. I use a lot of symbolism because I think that I'm busy like everybody else, and so using symbolism to sort of make my life a little more magical is a really quick, easy way. I think about liminal spaces when I walk through a doorway or down a hall, or those kinds of things. So I think that it is a matter of practicing, and that's why it's called a practice, right?
Right.
Because if you keep doing it, you keep sort of focusing your energy on the things that you're trying to achieve with your magic, and so it strengthens your practice.
Mm-hmm.
You've seemed to have answered a bunch of the questions I already had. I was going to ask you about what magic was and the placebo effect. One thing I do want to ask, as a folklorist, what do you think like modern occultists misunderstand about folklore? Like, do you ever see, maybe in your opinion, especially like the difference between story and practice? Do people start to get that a little confused maybe?
Well, I think that I don't know about occultists specifically. I think people in general, the people in general, a lot of people believe that folklore are like old stories. They're set down, and that's what folklore is. But of course, folklore is a living thing, and there's always new folklore. We can see this in cryptids. We can see this in urban folklore, urban tales, and I think that I was referring earlier to like the alien abduction versus fairy, right? And when I look at those kinds of stories, those stories are very similar to me, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
run across this, mystical race of whatever, and you get spirited away, and you may be gone for, a day or a week or a year or however long they keep you there. And, that sounds very similar to me, to aliens, just with better technology. And so I think that's how stories work too, right? You start out, who knows what happens? Like maybe someone does have an experience and they step into a fairy ring and they're off to the land of, the fair folk. But maybe they go out and they accidentally eat, a hallucinogenic mushroom, right? And so they're like out for a couple days, and then they come wandering back, and like, what story do they tell? Well, whatever happened to them while they were tripping out. And then over time, of course, as we tell those stories, they get to be more and more grand. And so it turns into, Rip Van Winkle gone for 100 years. And so I think that what a lot of people get wrong is that, first of all, there are no stories that are from an expert view, right? There aren't stories that are better than others. And that's something that happened to us historically when people first started being folklorists, right, a couple hundred years ago, and they went out to capture those stories and they wrote them down. And then that was the story. But those folklorists were typically European, white, upper middle class and above, because they had the means to just go out and like record people's stories. And then they wrote them down, and that became the expert story. And then later we got, Disney and things like that. And then those started being our expert stories, which were sanitized versions of older stories.
Right.
And so I think that, now what I love about the internet, like, look, we're all here talking right now and we're sharing our stories, and I'll tell you my ghost stories if you want to hear them. But we're now talking to each other again. And I think that that's what people don't understand, that there is no expert in magic, right? There is no expert in folklore because it's so widely varied and people have so many different stories about it. And I can't prove that, your spell is better than my spell, which I think is something to be looked at when you practice your own magic. And I think of it much like I do cooking. And that's why I call it a magical recipe book. I love to cook. I've been cooking since I was a little kid. And that was a thing my mom and I did together. And so at a certain point, when I was sort of, going off on my own and not having her right there with me, I would follow recipes, right? Because I knew that they would work better than me guessing, right? And over time, I stopped doing that. And I started just, and I'll go, like everybody, I'll go on Pinterest if I'm going to do something new. I usually look up 3 or 4 recipes for the same kind of dish. And then I'll like pick and choose which parts of which recipe I want.
Yeah,
And so that is how I think that magic should work for people on the individual level,
right.
as opposed to just saying, well, this person has written all these books, so they must be right. And, it frustrates me when people are like, oh, you're doing it wrong. It's like, no, this is like, there was a time where there were no people, right? So at some point, somebody made this up, right? Somebody did the first magic, right? It's all made up. And so just because something was made up a really long time ago doesn't mean it's necessarily more valid than somebody who's making something up now. And again, it's with people who are in diaspora, they bring their magical practices and they bring their stories with them. And then those things change depending on where they end up. And, like when, like, it used to be that for Halloween, people would carve turnips, right? And that was what they did. And then they got to America and there were no turnips and they had pumpkins. And then people found out that pumpkins are way easier to carve than turnips. And so, they kept doing that. And then that story went back out into the world. And then people started doing it around the world, right? So I think that, it's all made up. So don't feel bad if you don't do it the way that someone tells you is right or wrong. Because although there are things that we can, study and discover about how energy works and how placebos work and all of these kinds of things, we and how morphic resonance works, how the resonating of the earth affects our bodies, and all of these things we can study. And then you start to see that some of this folklore is really based in things that work, even if they didn't have the science, right? When people talk about smudging, they oftentimes use sage, right? And they or smoke seining or smoke cleansing, whatever you're going to call it. And sage, interestingly, if you burn sage in a closed space, the bacterial and viral level goes way down. And if the space stays closed, it stays down for like 24 or 48 hours. I can't remember. So they really were cleansing when they do something like that. And so I guess that's part of my point. We keep finding out things about how when we started studying quantum physics, we started finding out that maybe these energetic chords that people talk about wasn't really so silly after all, because when people discovered what quantum entanglement was, which is an actual physical connection, like a physical connection in the real world with another person. And it doesn't really matter how far away they are from you. Once you've got that connection, you've got that entanglement until you work to get rid of it. So the whole idea of cutting cords, where people are like, oh, that's really woo. And, that's people are imagining this stuff. Well, then we learned that no, we do get entangled with things. And there are specific things you can do to break those entanglements. And I think that without knowing that, people started using ritual in order to do things like break those entanglements, and they accidentally stumbled into an effective way to break the connections they don't want. And there are other, like when I talk about, cutting the cord, symbolism is great there. You're thinking about it, and the way that you break down entanglements is by making other entanglements. So if you can put someone out of your mind, then you're having entanglements with the people around you, or the plants or the animals around you, or your stuff, right? And so it does break down over time, that entanglement to the person that you're trying to put out of your mind. So
nice. I agree, and that was you're very well spoken. So I do highly appreciate that. You could tell you've done a lot of thinking on this. There's something about though, because I do agree about how it is important that each individual finds their own practice and doesn't allow others to try to dissuade them from doing it. It's like that your practice is your own. I don't actually give a damn what kind of meditation or these things you do, as long as you're not harming others as you do it, because that's really important. However, to use your analogy of the sage, is that there are better versions of sage to use to clear a space. And let's say if you have a bad if you have a kind of sage that you've grown and it doesn't have the correct chemicals, the chemical makeup, so then when you burn it, it doesn't release the kind of smoke for the smudging to clear the space, because of it does kill the bacteria and it does neutralize mold and it does do these things that then if you're using a poorer version of sage, you're not going to get that kind of cleansing that you're kind of looking for. And so I think that there's something really important in that we can kind of understand that there is a scientific process of trying to calm the mind, hone the will, so your magical practice has a better usage and it actually works, because you can't just do any old ritual to get any old effect. You actually have to calm the mind, hone the will, and do the ritual. And then that is how you can make effect, cause, and change into the world. And so I'm always, this isn't anything to do with you. It actually has to do with just that there's a whole, like, it's cool, you do what you want, nothing is different. It's like, no, Chaucer was a better folklorist than a lot of the writers today. So there are, and I don't even like the word better, but because I agree with you there, but there's something about why Homer and the Odyssey and the Iliad have survived for thousands of years, just like why Chaucer we're still talking about, just like Grimm's fairy tales are still being talked about. It's because there was something about that writer, not because of any other thing, but because of they could tap into, using their will, the phantasmagoria, the imaginal realms with their magic, and they did it in such a way that now has withstood time. And so there's something there that I think is really important that we touch on.
Well, I think that it goes back to what we were talking about earlier when we're talking about why people believe what they believe. And I am not one to be like, anything goes, do whatever you want. I am taking a class right now in advanced magic. And we studied, some ancient magics and the Kabbalah, and we're studied energy work. And so I think that what is good about going back and saying, let's look at what other people have thought. Let's look at what they have tried, right? Because if something is effective, there's more and more people are going to incorporate that, and they're going to use it because it's working for them, and that's true with anything. Like if you're going to do yoga, and go study the poses and why those are effective in the combination that they are in, because there's a lot of study of how yoga can be most effective for different goals, right? So go learn those things, and then go off book, and then say, okay, I'm going to try this practice that a whole bunch of people say really works. And I'm going to, do it consistently in an ongoing way. Maybe it's meditation, right? And I think part of the problem is we all too often separate our sort of magical beliefs and lives from the mundane. I think it's all one thing. The magical is mundane. And so, but if you're going to, do yoga, don't do it for 2 days and be like, well, that didn't work. Do it for a while, because a lot of people have studied it and said, this is really effective. And I think, and of course, that's when people start to evangelize. They're like, oh, I got so much stronger and I lost all this weight. And blah. It's like, well, you're making a healthy choice for yourself. And people who do that often make more than one healthy choice. Right. Like, did you stop drinking at the same time? Did you, what is it? And so there is definitely something in there that you're talking about. I think it's complicated because I think that, people try stuff and they say, oh, it doesn't work. And that's with our beliefs too, right? Someone who's had a mystical experience, they're like, this stuff is 100% real. Like, I know it because I felt it. And then there are people who are like, well, I never felt it, so it can't be real. And so I think that it is about the belief ultimately and of what you're trying.
So I was going to say, now earlier you were talking about cooking in regard to, finding and then kind of create. And I think that at these things being practices, as you practice them, you become more familiar with the various tools. And like with art, I've been doing art since I popped out pretty much, and I'm over 50 now. And you learn to be able to facilitate doing things with the tools that in the beginning you could never have conceived. So as you practice these things, these nuanced elements within the working and the practice of the craft itself become the knobs of the machine that allow you to be able to fine tune these processes.
Right. And like, this reminds me, going back to the cooking. So as so many people did, I jumped on the sourdough bandwagon during lockdown. And I got my sourdough starter from a company, and they've got a bunch of videos. And so the basic loaf, I was sticking with that basic loaf. And at first my bread was good. And then it started to not rise as well. Right. And so I was like, I'm not doing anything different. And I was getting these flat loaves. They were dense. They were, too moist. And so I started going on other, mostly Facebook groups, and looking in Pinterest and trying to see. And what was happening was I was doing what I had learned from day one, which is when you feed your sourdough starter, it's like 1 part starter to 1 part flour to 1 part water by volume. And so I was doing that. But apparently over time, that doesn't create a strong starter. So my starter was getting progressively weaker and weaker, and I had to give it way more flour, is the short end of that story. And so, but I went to see what other people were doing. I tried it, and then it started working. And so, now I'm like, sometimes I'll do a 1 to 3 to 2 ratio, or 1 to 10 to 10, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish at the time.
But you've learned the mechanisms by which those tools function, so that you can facilitate refining the process.
Exactly right. And I think that's where our own belief and discernment comes in, what are we taking from other people and saying, I'm going to use this, it works. And what are we saying, that part of it didn't work for me, so my magic, I don't, and they make jokes all the time about like the brand new practitioners. They've got the chalice and the wand and the athame, and they've got all this stuff. They've got 27 herbs, and and then you get
and
to
spices.
you get to a more seasoned witch, and she's just like, burning some herbs and throwing out a curse or whatever she's doing, and so I think that the tools and the things that you use can be training wheels and help you, and if you're going to want to use the athame and it makes you happy, rock on, right? But if you want to use your finger for the same kind of thing, that's good too. It just depends on what you feel like is necessary, and what kind of, where you want to put your time, energy, and effort.
Yeah, nice. Israel Regardie, in his a lot of his books, but he talks about how what you're trying to do is you're creating the mnemonic. And so by using the wand, you're understanding, you're honing your intuition. By using the sword, you're honing your reason or intellect, so on and so forth. And so it's really important, and why it's like a dramatic play, why we're using this cosmic drama, is because we're trying to understand that interrelationship between mind and materiality, or like you said in your book, the name of it, Mind Over Magic, is that they are so closely related that they are almost the same thing, but we must use the mind for our magic, because without understanding how our intention, or it's in Chinese, in like your Tai Chi practice or things like that, they say Yi leads your Qi, right? It's your intentionality is what's leading the energy to where it's going to go, where your thought goes, energy flows, or whatever we want to say. So there's something really important. It's not like, who cares if I'm using a sword, if I have my sword mudra, and then it's, what I mean?
Those are symbols.
Those
sword,
are
like you were saying, those are
exactly.
symbols that represent the refining of the various, So like you were saying, as far as the wand versus the finger, every symbol has 7 meanings, and each one of those has 7 meanings. So the fractaline aspect of the whole kind of is a multiplicity of tools that are available at our fingertips.
Right.
Yeah.
Finger.
What's kind of interesting about that is just like, even it's almost like because I'm a Buddhist, so like I do my chanting every morning and every evening for like an hour each time. And so in a way, it's almost like that magical practice. I actually don't do that. I do like astrological, which is what I was kind of wondering. How do you do magic without including the stars is always something I find interesting, because it seems like it's such a big part of our reality. But just going back to like the idea of like the magical tools and everything, it's like in my Buddhist practice, the whole idea is we're changing our causes, so we have the effect we want. So it's not, by chanting for hours, I'm settling my spirit, yes, but it's also like I'm changing my karma, I'm changing the causes that I'm making, because I'm creating the cause to achieve enlightenment. So when you do that for an hour, you're changing your life force energy, you're changing your karma, because the effect I'm going to get is closer to that enlightenment. So it's like, in a way, I don't know, because I'm not actually versed in like your guys' magical practice, but I'm guessing it's very similar in that way where, yeah, the tools aren't necessarily necessary. It's getting your mind in that state that says, I am creating a cause for something in the future, whether it be, I mean, I hope it's something good, not so materialistic, right? But that's just kind of something that kind of came up to my mind.
You know, that's really interesting. And what came up for me in listening to that is like, yes, you need to keep, you know, strengthening what the way that your mind is approaching it. But I think that it's funny because they say that there are a lot of people, when they work out, they do weights in a very particular way. They're taught how to do it, you lift correctly and all of that. But then a lot of people get hurt in day-to-day life because you don't train for things coming up in, like, you know, you twist to pick up a heavy grocery bag and you haven't ever strengthened that kind of movement. And I think the same is true when you're talking about focusing your mind, doing your energy work. And, you know, because if you're out in the world and someone crashes their car into you, it's upsetting. Right. So you have to have that practice already in place so you can apply some of those skills to, you know, day-to-day life, because it can be hard. And I'm an introvert. And so when I'm out in the world, like I will still go through a very specific process of like centering, grounding, and shielding. And is it, you know, my using that, is it my energy that I actually am grounding, or am I using that symbolism of imagining the grounding to work?
Right.
Again, it doesn't matter as long as it's working, and as long as in practical application, I can carry those skills out into my life.
Very nice. I did want to ask you, what would success in magic look like for you? Like what is, I mean, would you say that's like self-knowledge, enchantment, understanding,
Wisdom.
results? Yeah, wisdom. Yeah, I mean, what does success in magic look like to you now? And has that changed over your career? Because I know it has for me too. So.
Yeah, it definitely has changed for me. I think that success looks like a strong ongoing practice in which you achieve the results that you want. And I think that sometimes when we didn't either ask for it in the right way, or and I'm like, I use my pendulum every day, and I am hyper aware of how carefully you have to word things. You know, it's like the genie and the wishes, right? Like you don't know what's going to.
Yes.
And one of the things that I do with my coven is when we like do ritual, we do ritual at least once a month. And when we do it outside, we always, at the end, we drink mead, right? And we pass it around and drink it out of the horn and all of that. And it's great. It's fun. But when we do it outside, the first thing that we say is, I drink in fear and dread, because it's not a controlled environment when you're working magic outside. And so it's easier to have unexpected results, especially if you're, you know, trying to raise some powerful energy.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answers
I know
your
for
question.
me, yeah, no, it did. Yeah, you kind of answered it when you said, you know, finding what works for you and gets you results. Yeah, I would say even from me when I was first starting, I think it was more of somewhere along more results, and I think I'm more at the point where I'm just trying to look for understanding and knowledge, and not so much like materialistic things in my life. But yeah. Then there was also a lot of like ritualistic stuff. I know that was very, I guess, getting that down, you know, is very huge for me. But yeah, thanks. Did anybody have any other questions before I ask any other ones?
Well, then I want to kind of hit off of what you were saying, Nick, is that then there's the two different styles, right? There's the idea of the high magic and low magic. you know,
Yes.
high magic or the theurgia, right? That divine working. And then low magic being is in, I'm trying to like formulate a love life, or I'm trying to find my keys, or blah, 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 so forth and so on. But it's fascinating. It's like eventually I feel like you lay the foundation of trying to see how to find your keys the fastest until you realize, if I were a better person, I wouldn't lose my keys. And
Put
so
them in
it's
the same
like,
place
if
every time.
it can put them in the same place every time. Exactly, Mark. So it's like a fascinating thing to be like, eventually, hopefully the individual process of the alchemical pathway is that we're going to just understand that if I hone my mind, train my will, understand the body-mind connection, that then I can get rid of the nonsense to bring in the positivity, thus balancing what Kaiva was talking about and balancing the karma, balancing out my karma, because I don't want to take any more karma on, which is why it's like, why I don't want to connect myself to other people. I'm trying to disconnect myself from everything else so I can rebuild my own understanding of who I am and why I'm even here. And so there's just like, I kind of like what you're saying, Nick, with what you've come to in your own practice, being all like, I'm just trying to figure out wisdom and my own mind and like how to be a better boyfriend or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yep.
So it's, yeah, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's essential within all the structure and like the essential function of it, of why people believe what they believe. And it's based on the current mythos, the current things that are in the air. And what are we dealing with now in regard to the current mythos in the air? We're having to deal with all of these things that the black fondle slab is dealing to us, you know, and that's a sort of magic in itself that's creating the modern day mythos that's kind of taking the imagination of the populace as a whole and directing it outside of our own individual will and intent. So this thing of hermetism, this thing of moving away, shedding these things so that we can find our true self and focus our own energy versus all of the forces that are flooding in. And I think it's the most essential question that really is right now is, why do people believe what they believe?
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like when they take all of our imaginations, that's so much magical power.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and that's why I have a hard time being like, you know, technology is the future. Because I'm like, I don't know. Like, I personally don't want that, you know? So it's like, why do I have to believe in this mythos that they want us to believe? So I think there's like a healthy amount of conscious awareness of like, what are they trying to make the future? And like, do we actually all want that? And like, that's the nice thing about technology, I guess. Like social media helps us like come together and say like, no, we don't. Let's, you know, figure something out. But yeah, that's a really beautifully said. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And I think that, you know, some of the beliefs that even we've been handed, right? Like the idea that it's been around for, you know, more than 100 years, that we are sort of individual silos and not connected to what's around us. And that, you know, that makes for really great students, and that makes that grow up to be really good factory workers, or, you know, like, and that's, you know, 100 years ago, when that was the future for a lot of people, it helps make them, you know, complain less and be quieter and work ridiculous hours in dangerous conditions. And so, but before that, had very much around the world, people understood that we were much more connected, whether it was just connected in our community or connected energetically and psychically, and however you want to look at it. People they knew that there was connection to the land and to the animals and to other people. And so, and we just grew up in a world that scoffed at people being connected. And so you have to unlearn some of those things that we were handed as children, right? And that's how we were taught. And that's what everyone, you know, around us were saying. And so it's hard to unlearn stuff. And you can't do something that you don't believe is possible. Right. You know, before the 40s, was it in the 40s, where people believed that it was not possible for a human being to run faster than a 4-minute mile, right? Until some British dude did it,
And
right?
then it starts to happen that everybody can do it. It's
Yep.
like the rats in the maze that once one of them learns it, there's some sort of and it's that I don't know if you've heard of Einstein, but he documented this phenomenon
No,
called
never.
spooky action at a distance,
Yeah,
where he would prick the baby rabbits even from different distances, and the mother would feel it instantly. And so there's this intrinsic interconnection, that modern Wetiko or commercialism has kind of worked to separate us from.
Right. And I think that, and that is one of the quotes that I use in my book. So I love that you brought that up. And that gets us back to, quantum entanglement, and
Right.
and we've known that this is a real thing for 100 years because Einstein was talking about it. And so when we start to look at our connections, we're still like, people are still being made fun of for saying stuff like this, and people act like they're crazy, or they say, oh yeah, she's weird or whatever. But then we find out, like, no, there's reality behind it.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's an interesting way to look at things of, like, if something doesn't make sense of what another person is saying, can you reframe that in a way that helps you understand what their experience is? And maybe it'll help you, because the more that we work on ourselves and make ourselves better, the more we make the collective better.
Right.
And I guess that's another important thing that tells me what success is in magic, is when we are constantly making the collective better, because there's a lot of people out there that are making the collective worse. And so, can we just continue to do that in whatever way that we can, and adding our magic to that?
Right.
Yeah,
And
nice. Yeah, okay.
I think, like, in a sense, a stimuli, right? So it's like there's always the yin and the yang, right? And like the way I look at it from a Buddhist, like, this world is a training ground, and not some sort of like, video game sort of way, but
Jojo.
it is the time to really acknowledge that all the hate you see in the world is inside of you, right? And all the people you despise, you are, right? So it's like this constant, if we point the finger continuously saying they're making the world worse, well, how are we making somebody's life worse? I always run into that. When do I stop blaming? And I'm not perfect, right? Because I do that, right? So it's like, but when do we stop pretending that it wasn't meant to be that way, right? Like, and I'm not saying pretending, but that's probably not the right word, but we're not living in the world of Kozen Rufu, of enlightenment, right? So we're not living in a perfect reality. So we have to acknowledge, if we want to get there, everybody has to go there too. So that person doing wrong, they have to, and like I said, are they doing wrong? Like, they're fulfilling their karmic journey for whatever reason. And sometimes people's karmic journey is so hard to see. We think they're thriving, but really they're like deteriorating on the inside, because they're here just people pleasing everybody. So it's hard sometimes to know why and what needs to happen. But I think it's always important to recognize that, like, the yin and the yang is essential. For you to be a better person, that thing has to exist for you, to show you that you don't want to be that thing, right? So, and I totally agree with you too. At the same time, it's just always a good reminder for me personally to remember that person, there's a part of that inside of me, and I need to acknowledge that I'm an asshole. And if I can do that, I win, right? Because I acknowledge, like, that part is a part of my reality. So just want to throw that out there too.
And I think the Bodhisattva is the perfect symbol of that, in regard to, we all have to make it. We all have, and he's going to be the last one after everyone ascends to be able to, move into the higher realms. Yeah, it's a beautiful concept.
I don't know what if you guys believe in egregores or not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's part. Yeah. Okay, good. And I think that's part of what you're getting at, is that we create things together through our our beliefs, our energy as well, right? And so what we are putting our thoughts toward, and I think when you look at things like the Secret, it's sort of pointing in the right direction. It just doesn't really go far enough.
Right.
You can't just imagine like I've got my vision board, and have something happen, right? Like you've got to, again, the magic is mundane, right? And so it's all a part of it. And so you have to be doing things that we would consider mundane. I can't sit at home and wish my book into existence, right? I had to write it.
Get the put
And
work.
yeah. And so I think that yeah, like when we're putting our energy in the places that we need to be, we are helping bring that energy out to the world and hopefully tipping the scales the right direction.
But then you're off balance, right? So it's like, because it's like, once you tip the scales, it's like, it's such a fragile reality then, right? Because it's like, you've tipped it. Now it's like, now we're on a tight wire, because eventually that's going to like do something, right?
Rebalancing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I want to ask you, was there ever a time when like you actually stopped practicing? Was there ever a time that you had like doubts or anything like that? Or that believed or stopped believing?
There's time that I was not practicing. I don't know that necessarily means I wasn't believing. I just was much more focused on the mundane world. And I think that those beliefs just took a back seat to the point where they weren't like I might as well have stopped believing, because I wasn't doing anything about those beliefs and then putting any energy toward it. And so, and it was a couple different times in my life where just I had other stuff going on. I was partying a lot in my 20s. And so, it's harder to practice. It's harder to maintain it. Like it's harder to work out when you're partying a lot. It's harder to do a lot of things. And then when I was getting a divorce and things were very difficult, and like you just start to focus on the things, like sometimes in your life you focus on the next thing in front of you, and that's all you can do in that moment. So yeah, definitely stopped practicing at certain points in my life. I don't know at this point that I ever would again. Like something catastrophic would have to happen for me to be in that kind of place.
Nice. One thing else I did want to ask too, like if you do remember, what's your earliest memory of something working out that you actually couldn't explain away? Like you're like, all right, this is real.
Something working out. Oh,
or was like enough really to be like, it kept you going. You're like, okay, this is magic, or there's something there.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I think that
sorry.
Because it's like trying to remember back, and memory is faulty, and so like I don't know that I remember a lot of my early magical practices, and so and I don't like, it's hard for me to suss out like a moment in which I went from that like. And they say, like, I don't know if you guys know about this, like in Ireland, they will move a road that they're planning on building in a certain place if they think that it's going to disrupt elf home or fairy home. And what the people say is, well, it's probably not true, but why take a chance?
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people sort of have that. And I think that there are times in my life where I was like doing that. And so that was really more of a going through the motions kind of time. And so, and of course there's doubt, right? You're like, is that a coincidence? Did that really happen? Am I crazy? Like so many people are saying. And so I think that it's an ever evolving kind of belief system for me. And so, I think a long time ago it's probably not, but why take a chance? And it's sort of just been getting stronger and stronger in my belief. And again, it gets back to definitions. What I was defining as intuition, I now define differently. And if I had been defining it as like, those are my spirit guides talking to me, then I would have said, I mean, it's been my entire adult life that I've believed, right? Because I believe in my intuition. And how is that not magical, right?
Right.
And so yeah, like, and I'm one of those people, I consider myself to be pretty lucky, right? And consistently that plays out. And that's just part of what I think. And I'm like, oh, these, and maybe I'm paying more attention to when good things happen than bad. And maybe that's why I believe things are working out. But, you know, it's, yeah, just.
Well, and I think there's also within playing with these ideas, you know, when you say, I think I'm lucky, at the same time, you want to be lucky, but you don't want to think too much you're lucky because you might taint your luck. So there's kind of these nuanceful elements within the belief system that kind of waver on the creation of the magic itself, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I recommend when people are feeling doubt is to start to look for the magic, right? See that you feel better when you go out into the woods, right? Pay attention to that. Or, you know, if you see a feather on the ground and your great aunt collected, you know, cardinal statuettes, right? Think to yourself, is that a message? Is there, you know, and so when you start to make those connections to how we are connected to what's around us, you kind of are drawing magic into your life, again, through your beliefs, right?
Yeah. Synchromysticism.
Mm-hmm. And some of it too, I think, is like, when I think about divination, like I said, I use my pendulum, right? I use it a lot. And I think that it's important with any divination type is that it's about how we interpret things, right? So I can have the exact same card pull a year from now as I do today, and I'm going to tie it to different activities in my life. And so how we think about how we think is important. And so look at what you're doing. If you know, something happens, you go, oh, that's lucky, or, oh, that is a sign about this. That's about, in part, who you are as well in this moment.
I think that's like, there's some truth to that, but then you can also, like, if there is actual, like, for instance, like I get a lot of things and then I'll go to research it, right? And then in the research, I find that the thing that I actually like got from my guardians was actually something that was real. And it's part of this trail that connected things that weren't previously connected because you found something that was in a book that you know, so it's like, there is something where I feel very much like, you know, how much is it? I don't actually think it's my mind. You know what I mean? I don't think it's my mind. I definitely feel like having special relationships with the stars and the planets. Like everybody's got a natal chart. So you're lucky because you have Jupiter at the MC trying your ascendant, or, you know what I mean? And it's exalted, right? So luck can be written in your life. You've got the lot of fortune on your ascendant, right? So there's like ways that luck just can be, you can be lucky. But I do think, like, I don't think I think myself into the signs I get from spirit, you know, like I definitely have done the research after that invitation to look at the thing or the symbol that I received. Right. So it's interesting.
Yeah. It brought up a story for me. A while back, I was getting a reading and we were on a video call. And the psychic was like, hey, you know, this is your mother. And she was talking about my cat. I'd just gotten my cat. Another COVID lockdown adventure. And I had a cat many years before. And then in the middle, I had a bunch of dogs, right? So I've only had 2 cats in my life. And so I just gotten Puck. And she said something about, oh, the old cat doesn't like the new cat. This is what my mother was saying. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And then she made a joke about there being some cat poop, like outside of the litter box, right? And so I was like, okay, whatever. So I go in and I look, right? And there's nothing there, right? And I was like, okay, whatever that was about. And then when I got up the next morning, I went out into the room where the litter box is, and sure enough, there was like poop outside of the litter box. It was like,
Mhm.
okay. So that, so I think that you do things that you say, yes, that's really real,
Mhm.
I think that brings back up the thing that I am continually trying. So I feel like the mechanized postmodern functionalist world is the death of magic. And
Mm.
so it's really important to try to bring back the idea that all wasn't created from materiality, but first it was consciousness and everything sprung out from that initial, in the beginning, there was the word. And from that, we can have a good understanding of how important it is to fine tune. This point here I'm getting to is fine tune the nervous system, because the nervous system is not creating consciousness. The nervous system is like a radio frequency tuning mechanism that's tuning into the consciousness of your soul. And when you do that, and why I think things like the Hermetic tradition and the magic through tradition, through time, the Western esoteric tradition, and some of those who have the ability to be more intuitional and hone the intuition, so you understand that it wasn't your mind that created this thing. It was that you have the ability to tap into this current that is always there. And
Right.
you can tap into your guardians, tap into your higher self, into God or whatever it is. And that then it isn't ego Brandon doing it or whoever, but it is actually this higher self that's speaking to you. And then from there, like Kaiba was saying, then you're all like, well, that was really close to home. And then you start reading about it and you realize that some traditional astrologer or Eliphas Levi or some Iamblichus or somebody made this connection, and then you have another spot of the pattern making machine that our brain does to realize that I just hit on something and I want to take that gut feeling or that intuition or that heart feeling or whatever it was that made you, not even made you, but helped you discover this truth. And that's why I think it's so important we understand certain ancient philosophers like Plato is talking about his understanding of epistemics, or his understanding of knowledge is that you aren't ever like learning anything. You're only remembering something. Exactly. And so, and through that remembering, you are then tapping into this thing, and it's not a thing at all. And it's that exactly. You're tapping into the nous, right?
Yes.
That higher God intellect that was the first creator, but the first creator wasn't a thing at all. It was the verb, as in John Michael Greer's Magical Traditions, when he rewrote the Eliphas Levi's work. He's talking about the verb, right? It is that I don't think, therefore I am. It is that I think, therefore I exist. And through that existing, everything else stems into being. So the more and what I'm getting at is the more we hone the nervous system, the more we can tap into these higher frequencies, which we were talking about, like walking through the forest. If your nervous system is honed to the things, you can tap into these things. And some people might call it energy, others call it spirit, and then through that practice, we can have more synchronistic experiences and witness the beauty of the universe.
I just read that when you walk through the forest, if you walk through the forest barefoot, you're linking in with the mycelium.
Yep.
And the mycelium of the forest, every square inch of floor has over 300 miles of mycelium network in it, and how that links in with the memory of the earth and the cosmos, and like all those intercommunications of all those systems in regard to us being a part of that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I have a question for Tracy. Tracy, so you use your pendulum every day. What else is a part of your practice, or like the ritual that you did outside, like every month? Like, what does that look like? Just curious.
So when I get up in the morning, I typically leave an offering and light candles on my god and goddess altars. And I've got 5 altars. And so sometimes I leave an offering at my ancestor altar. And then I think that let's see, other parts of my, well, I journal, and I think that's part of my practice. I like to do full moon rituals. I usually do a road opener for a full moon ritual. As far as our communal, our circle rituals, those are usually pretty standard. We each pull a rune and we talk about that, and then we call in the various deities that the group itself works with, and invite them into the space. And then the person who's sort of the leader of the group will have a specific ritual planned in which we talk about certain things. And sometimes we raise energy. We'll be, stomping and clapping, or running around in a circle. And then we, like I said, at the end, we typically pass the horn around, and whoever gets the last sip of mead from the horn is, they say, well, what do we say? The devil takes the hindmost, because they're going to have really wild dreams that night. And then, and that's pretty much what our rituals look like. And then we kind of decompress. We usually hang out for an hour or so talking. So that's that. And then like other things, I burn incense to remind myself of, like sort of the air spirits, especially when it's cold out and everything is closed up and I'm not feeling the breeze. And what else do I do? Sometimes I use sound, like I do a sound clearing a lot of times. And I use a lot of symbolism. I think a lot about, what I'm doing or how I'm cooking, and, like I'll be stirring in a clockwise direction because that food's going to nourish me in the future, and bringing those kinds of things in. I'll typically light candles when I'm in the kitchen cooking on my kitchen altar. I sometimes remember to dust my business altar and my main altar. But that's all, that's part of the earth, right? That dust is, I can use that symbolically too, because I really hate dusting.
You have your altar set up in like specific areas? Like, is there a reason why you put like, your office one? Is it in your office, or is it like in a specific direction, or like, how does that look?
My office one is like right here, because I typically work here. This is where I write and all of that. And my main altar is actually right next to me. And I would say that one like I don't know that any of my altars, except maybe my god and goddess altar, that one looks like an altar. The rest of them just look more like decor. And so my kitchen altar's in my kitchen. I do a garden altar outside, and when it's nice out. My ancestor altar is right there. And I do have an offering up right now. And so, my god and goddess is in essentially what is the center of the home. And well, at least on this floor. It'd have to be like on the ceiling if it were in the center. But yeah, that's kind of how I've placed them. And, some of it is just where I had room. And, obviously some are themed, right? I keep most of them in here because this is where I spend most of my time.
And I'm also wondering, in regard to your practice, does the dreamscape play into your reality in regard to the reflection between this world and the other?
Yes, I think that, and I capture my dreams. What I do to capture them as much as I can, I keep my phone by the side of the bed, and I'll do like a voice note when I wake up, because then I don't have to turn on the lights and wake up, because as soon as you start doing that, it starts to go away. So I just do a quick voice note to capture them, and then go back to sleep. And it's like, I always think, oh, I'm going to remember that for sure. Never do. And then, I get up, and then I go and sort of like reflect on what the symbolism is for me. I do more of my journeying through meditative practices than through the dreams. I use the dreams more like divination for myself.
Right.
And like that is, it's a backdoor into my subconscious of
Yes.
what I'm thinking about. So yeah, but I do journeying, and in my class, I've gone to the upper world and the underworld and all that kind of thing through those practices. I have a little trouble because I'm one of those people like I didn't even know up until a year or two ago that like when people were visualizing things, they like saw pictures. They were like little movies in their head. Because I
Yeah.
don't. It's just like black for me, or it
Yeah.
was. I've been working on it very hard, and now I am seeing images when I'm doing my visualization. But it
Right.
was it's taken me a couple of years to get to even that point. And I used to like start to see things, and then if I like in my mind looked at it too directly, it would be gone.
Oh,
And so I didn't know. I was like, you all see like little movies in your head?
yeah, developing that intrinsic space. As an artist, that's what I do. I'm visual, and like I have so many images rolling through my head. It gets a little out of control sometimes. So, but yeah.
Also, drishti is good too. Like in my Buddhist practice, we have a scroll that we chant to, and we have like a drishti, a looking point, and that can be really helpful because sometimes when your eyes are closed, like it's hard to actually remember. You still have to focus them, right? So when your eyes are open, you can actually focus your eyes on a single point. Yeah.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask you too, as we start to wrap this up, for this book, was there any like influences behind it? Like, what kind of people have influenced you hugely that may have, helped you do this book?
I think I've done a lot of reading. So there's lots of authors out there that I think helped influence me. Personally, and when I say I've done a lot of reading, when we're looking at sort of the psychology side of things in the book, I did a lot of reading of like business help books, right? And sort of how we think in business and how we react in, different business settings of like, well, we've always done it this way, and so I got into some of that in the later chapters of, and it would be the standard like business help gurus. And I think that again was like I'm not just taking it from a magical perspective, and so the magic influences, and of course there are. I mean, but it's sort of like just like a combination of what I've learned throughout my lifetime and incorporated it into my own belief systems. And so I don't know that I could pinpoint like specific people. I think what really influenced me in the writing of it more than anything was talking to people about this stuff and talking to, contacts, colleagues from my days in corporate America. I worked in construction for almost 20 years. And like in office environments, right? And I was like, like these people are going to think I'm crazy. And I even considered for a little while, like maybe I'm not going to use my real name, right? Because what if I ever had to go back to work and they would all think I was crazy? But I started to talk to people about it. And one person I could think of one time was like, right? Everybody else, and these are like, construction professionals. These are like, vice presidents and presidents of like major construction firms. They'd be like, yes, absolutely. I know what you mean. And because people have a certain knowing, I think, of
Practical.
Yeah, that they know that it works, and wherever they are, again, on that spectrum, they understand that things happen that they can't describe fully, right? And like even things that are taken as like regular, like intuition, or people who go to church and they have, communion, right? Like those people are like, that is the body of Christ. That is the blood, like in a real way. And we treat that as normal. It's like, well, if that's really turning into the body and the blood as soon as it like gets into your system, Okay, first of all, vampire cannibals, but whatever your belief is on that. And but they honestly believe in magic in lots of ways. So much of what happens, even in the Bible, is
Transcendentalism.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
I think that knowing of people just saying, yes, I know this is true, that I think allowed me to even write the book. So that would probably be one of the biggest influences, is just connecting with real people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did any of you have any other questions before we wrap it up soon? No? All right. Yeah. Tracy, if there's one thing you'd like to say about your book, or maybe you'd like to all leave us with.
Yeah, I think that, as we were talking about, it's all about the practice, right? Your beliefs play into it, your, everything that you want to use, all of that. But it's the ongoing regular practice that is going to make your magic more effective. You've got to use those spiritual muscles to do it in whatever way that looks for you. And do study what other people are saying, and try it. And then keep it up. Just keep doing it and keep doing it, because that's the most important part in all of this. Do your work, do your shadow work, do whatever you need to do to change where your beliefs go, and then keep doing it and keep doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I love that too. I couldn't have said that better myself too. Say that as a suggestion. Great stuff. I really loved having you on. I thought this was a great conversation. I probably get you on in the future again. Maybe even to talk a little bit more about the science stuff. I didn't want to hit that too hard, but yeah, very, very good stuff. And appreciate you all joining in too. Before we let you tell everybody where they can find your amazing book, let's start off with Magus first. Magus, where can we find all your amazing work?
Oh, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Tracy. It was a fantastic conversation. It's a great noontime conversation to get people all jumbled up in their days, to bring the magic into the mundane, and I think that is beautiful, because I think that's exactly what people should do. Yeah, so you can follow me at Magus in the Media on YouTube, on X, and on Instagram. It's where we bring myth, magic, philosophy, and meaning into the world, and from the stories that you and I and we all love. And make sure you watch it all. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share, and make sure you follow Occult Rejects, because that's where we're breaking it down with the greatest authors, where Nick is crushing it and bringing all the greatest crushers into one space, because that's what we do. As always, thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. And Robbie Marks, please let everyone know where they can find all your amazing work and all your amazing art.
Yes, it was a great conversation. I always love coming on. Gets me out of my little winter hermitage a little bit, and it was great to meet everybody. Yeah, if you want to check out my other stuff, you can go to my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX. And that has my MetaMindcast, my social media, my Patreon, my website. Everything is there. All the ways you can connect with me and what I'm doing. And this was great. Thanks, Nick.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. And for some of the new listeners out there too, Robbie's, we've been working with Robbie a long, long time. There's probably episodes. Yeah, there's episodes on his end. Go check them out that you probably have never heard us do.
So I just did. Yeah, I just did one on learning to lucid dream. I just did one on what was it? The creation of the human in the demon haunted world. I got a couple 2 years worth of backlog shows there for people to check out that are all timeless, evergreen per se. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you again, Robbie. And Kaiva, please let everybody know what's up with you and they can find all your amazing stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was great to chat with you, Tracy. This is the first time I've been part of the Rejects crew. So this is my first time having a conversation with somebody like you. So I appreciate that. It was really fun. I really, really enjoyed to hear the similarities we have. So I do tarot and astrology readings. I do my weekly reports. I put them up on YouTube, and then I do my daily reports on Instagram. So you can follow me at Kaiva Rose on Instagram and YouTube. And then you can get a reading at 11kaivarose33.com. And you can find my young adult fantasy novel at ruodyssey.com as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Awesome. And Tracy, please let everybody know where they can find your book and your website, your podcast, everything.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for hosting me today. This was a lot of fun and
Good.
really interesting stuff. And I learned a lot from you guys. So I really appreciate that. If you want to track me down, the most central place is probably my website, which is folkloringlife.com. And that will get you to my book. It'll get you to both of my podcasts. It will get you to my school community where we have conversations like this all the time, and we talk about magic and we talk about folklore. So do come join me. If you want to find me on socials and think that I am not a spirit and still in the land of the living, you probably want to go to Blue Sky because that's where I am most active, and I'm barely active on a lot of the other socials. So yeah, go to folkloringlife.com and it'll shoot you out everywhere to where I am.
Awesome. Thank you again, Tracy, for coming on. Hopefully have another conversation with you again in the future. Thank you all the other rejects for joining me. That's what's up. And everybody in the chat, thank you all for stopping by. And yeah, that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.